Well, it's usually around this time of year, usually after a set of results have come out. Some people have passed, some people haven't passed, or when you have exams in front of you coming up, where you get quite a few questions about what's a good strategy to follow. It's really different for every person. It depends on how you approach learning. I have a particular style that I use that may not work for everybody. So what we can do is we can look at the data, and we've been doing this for quite some time, is we look at the data we have in terms of the patterns in the data, patterns of successful candidates versus not successful candidates, and patterns of progression where we see that doing something over a period of time either improves performance or doesn't improve performance. So we know when enough is enough. And I'm going to start by looking at some of the data we have on mock exams and question banks. For mock exams, we have 1 year of data on this, and that's it. So I'm not quite convinced that the data is robust enough. I'm going to need a couple more exams behind us to really fill out this one. But for question banks, we have quite a lot of data there because we have several years of observations for this. And then the third point we'll look at is the asking questions to help fill out your knowledge. And there is a pattern that we've noticed there as well that was rather surprising to us, but we have some theory about why that's there. And we'll end the video with a number of suggestions about what works really well. And then you can pick and choose what fits well with what you want to do. Now, while we can't say, look, this is a strategy that works, what we can do is point out what doesn't seem to work statistically on average based on groups. It may work for you, but on average, we haven't seen it work, or we have seen it work. So let's start with mock exams. We'll start with mock exams and question banks because I see a lot of comments out there about where do I get more questions? I need to do more questions. I need more question banks, more mock exams, etc. And there's this feeling that you need 15, 20 mock exams and 10,000 questions. And the data that we have shows that a lot of that is wasted time. That the gains come very early in that process, and then they taper off and they become insignificant. So let's look at mock exams, and I've broken it down level 1, level 2, level 3 AM, and level 3 PM because there is a peculiarity between the two exams that we didn't really expect, but there it is. I've got exam 2, 3, and 4, and how we set this up is the sample size. This is we don't have exam 1 because we have to show progression. If you do one exam, we have one score. It's did your score improve from exam 1 to exam 2, and that's what these tests are for. So for exam 2, for level 1, for example, we take everyone who wrote the second exam, only that group, and then we look at their improvement over the first exam. When we go to exam number 3, that sample size becomes even smaller because it has to be everybody that wrote 3 and 2 and 1. So the N becomes a little smaller as you go through the exams. From exam 1 to exam 2, right across the board, improvement. So if you're doing mock exams, it is worth doing one mock exam and seeing where you're weak, because you will perform better on the second mock exam. And this is when we look at the groups, we're looking at differences of means. So you have the average score in exam 1, the average score in exam 2, and you have two distributions, and you look at the means of the distributions and you determine whether or not they're different. And the number we're looking at here is a p-value. It is the t-stat, the alpha that would be associated with the t-stat, and where it would be significant. So we can say that doing at least 2 mock exams is worth it because there is improvement. Mock exam 1, we theorize, gives you feedback so you know where to pick up your score and where to focus your review so that you can elevate your performance for mock exam 2. Going to mock exam 3, doing the third mock exam, we do see significance at level 2, level 3, AM and PM, but level 1 is not significant at 5% anymore. You'd have to test at 10%. The t-stat has an alpha associated with 6.8%. It's still, there's still something there if you want to say, well, is it worth doing a third mock exam? It appears that it is, but it's not as impressive a difference between means as going from the first exam to the second exam. Where it breaks down is the fourth exam. Going on to exam number 4. This is at 0.546. This is telling us that the average of the group who did mock exam 4 is no different than when they did mock exam 3. So the extra time spent getting to number 4 added no extra value. It didn't improve the score at all. So perhaps that was time that might have been better spent on something else, because it doesn't appear to be moving the score forward. Same with level 2, 0.36. That's highly insignificant. It doesn't appear that going from 3 to 4 is adding a lot of value. Level 3 AM still is in there. And level 3 PM, not so much. But we do see that it's getting less and less insignificant as you move from level 1 to level 3. With level 3 probably being, sort of the better place to be. So what we've done is we've brought the number of exams down at level 1 and level 2 as well. With the move to computer-based testing, the questions have shrunk considerably. So we still put 4 mock exams up, but those 4 have the same number of questions as the previous, as what 3 would have had previously. So we have reduced the number of questions in line with that, but not for the level 4 AM. It does appear to have value in doing more AM questions, so we have not reduced that one at all. So that's just one pattern that we've seen is that when you're doing mock exams, the question is there such a thing as too many? Yeah. You get to a point where doing more of them is not going to move your score. That after each one, your score is pretty much going to stay the same. That your time would be spent or better spent on doing other things. In the last couple of screens, we'll look at, I think I got 5 or 6 other options that you can follow rather than spending 3 more hours or 2.5 hours writing another mock exam 4, 5, 6, etc. Maybe try some other strategies. Let's look at question banks. The question banks are, we don't quite have all the answers we want here, but we have noticed a clear pattern. Those that start off scoring low, stay low. So if your first few, as you go through the question bank for each reading and you're doing quizzes of 10 or 20 and you're scoring under 60%, that cohort doesn't seem to improve. Statistically speaking, there may be someone out there that says, no, but I have. But that's not statistics, right? Statistics looks at the group. What's the tendency for the group as a whole? Those that start off scoring low tend to stay low, which is, sort of rather interesting. And we think it has something to do with using question banks as an alternative to learning as opposed to a supplement to learning, because we do see a lot of candidates that are looking for question banks. And we do see some companies out there suggesting that all you need is the question bank, that you can learn everything you need from the question bank, therefore putting that narrative forward that you can prepare for an exam doing nothing but questions. Questions are meant to complete your learning. They're not meant as a replacement for learning. They're meant as a reinforcement for learning. So we'll look at sort of a good strategy to follow when it comes to question banks in the end. Is there such a thing as too many questions? Yeah, much as there's such a thing as too many mock exams. Too many questions when you're substituting the questions for the learning isn't going to really help because you have this conceptual model in your mind of what you need to know. So let's just take Black-Scholes-Merton at level 2 as a good example because it's a tough structure to get mentally, to get a conceptual map in your mind of what it looks like. So you have this faulty conceptual image in your mind and you're doing questions. And sometimes the questions aren't fitting that conceptual model that you have and you're getting them wrong and you're reading the answers, but the answers don't fit with what you think you know. So it's not really helping you because you have to go back and you have to fix that mental model first and then you'll find the questions fall into place. But just testing yourself again and again and again on a faulty conceptual model isn't going to improve your score. It's simply going to continually, repeatedly highlight that you have a faulty conceptual model, but it won't fix it. So I think that's what's going on here. We don't know because this is not something that we expected to see. But we do find that those that start off scoring low rarely progress. They tend to always score low and aren't moving forward. And I think it is primarily because they are confusing questions for learning, that it is a replacement to doing all this other work as opposed to just reinforcement at the end. Let's move on to asking questions. This one is really interesting. So this is a big data set, 3 years of observations on this, because we have a lot of data on this, and our sample sizes are large. We're talking in the tens of thousands. So we do have very robust data on this, and it's fairly consistent each year. And there is a very peculiar observation with group 3 here. So we've broken it down into, we started by breaking it down into 2 groups. Not everybody who subscribes asks questions. Some people never use the comment section at all, and it's the majority. 58.9% of candidates never use the comment section at all. 40.75%, well, actually the difference, right? 41.1% ask questions. But we broke that down into 2 groups because we do see in the comment section 2 very distinct groups. We see the occasional question asker, and we see the frequent question asker. So we put a cutoff line and we broke it off into 2 groups to see if they're significantly different. Those that ask fewer than 15 questions throughout the whole year, that up until the exam, ask fewer than 15 questions. The average question per candidate in that cohort is 2.8 questions. So if you're asking less than 15, that group tends to ask significantly fewer than 15, 2.8 on average. We find no difference in pass rates between these 2 groups. No difference at all. So those that don't ask questions, never ask a single question, versus those that ask fewer than 15 questions, there is no difference in their pass rates. Then we have this cohort over here, and it's a really, really small group compared to everything else. However, the N in here is still greater than 100. So we do have some good power on the tests here. 0.35% tend to ask more than 0.35% of our users tend to ask more than 15 questions, and the average number of questions asked in this cohort is 87. So that's rather interesting. Those that ask fewer than 15 questions tend to ask significantly fewer than 15, and those that ask more than 15 tend to ask significantly more than 15. And this is, of course, is skewed because we have some that are 200, 300, and 400 questions deep so far. Here's the problem, though. Significantly lower pass rates by quite a bit. The p-value there is 0.000. I mean, it's obvious. Significantly lower pass rates. And again, I'm talking about the group. You know, you may be one of those people that say, no, hang on a second. I asked a bunch of questions. I passed each time. Yes. Individually. Statistics can't say much about an individual. Statistics can say a lot about populations or samples or populations, but not about any one particular individual. But as a group, we have significantly lower pass rates. Well, that brings up a curiosity. If you're asking that many questions and you're getting answers for those questions, what's going on here? How come we have significantly lower pass rates? I thought in this cohort we would have significantly higher pass rates, and we don't. And we've had this number for a while. I've had this number for a couple of months, and I've been going back and forth in my mind about what it possibly could be. I've been looking at different research in learning theory to see if there's anything done on this to sort of help guide the way. And there's a few interesting articles that talk about how it is the process itself that might be setting the candidate up for failure. By the way, this cohort here, 0.35%, they do ask 58% of all the questions, just so that you have some idea of the sheer volume of questions. With that volume of questions, we should see dramatically better results, and we don't. There's a problem. It breaks down like this. Level 1, of the 0.35% of the full sample size, 64% are at level 1, 35% are at level 2, and only 1% at level 3. As you progress through the levels, there tend to be fewer and fewer questions per candidate, which seems to make a lot of sense. But what's going on here? So what we thought we would do is say, well, okay, look, we have reading videos, we have end of chapter question videos, and there's question bank and mock exams. Where are the questions concentrated? Are they concentrated primarily in the reading videos, and then when we go to the end of chapter question videos, the questions fall off significantly, and when we go to the quiz bank and the exams, they fall off significantly? That would be good, because that would say all of the work we do on our side to support these candidates is paying off, because we're seeing a significant drop when it comes to the end of chapter questions and the quiz questions. It still doesn't explain this though, but we thought we would start there. Let's start there. Here's what we find. No difference. None at all. That the pace of questions in the reading videos are not having any spillover effect when it actually goes to the questions. That none of that knowledge seems to be transferring over to either the end of chapter videos or into the question bank. And we did the reading videos per hour. Questions per hour, because we have fewer hours here. So we can't just look at the total sum of questions. You have to have some common metric on which to look at them. We looked at it per hour, no significant difference. And here we looked at it per 10 questions. No significant difference in the amount of questions being asked. So therein lies the problem. So we have this curious solution that we have these inquisitive candidates who ask a lot of questions, but it doesn't seem to help in terms of its ability to move those answers into question banks, into mock exams or end of chapter question videos, and you have significantly lower pass rates. And some of the results we found, the one result I found that I think is the most coherent with what's going on is that you're not working for the answer. You know, when you're just getting an answer after answer after answer. What's this? What's that? What's this? Where'd you get that? Where'd you get that? What's this mean? What's that mean? And when you're just being supplied with answer after answer, you haven't worked for that answer. So you never really own the knowledge. You're sort of just renting it. So you never really come to truly understand it because you haven't thought it through. In your mind, you're just given this puzzle piece and you say, okay, well, I'll put it into place, but you're not quite sure exactly how it fits everywhere. So you're saying, well, okay, I'll remember this and I'll remember that and I'll remember this. But you change the situation just slightly and suddenly you have another question. Well, hang on a second. I thought we did it this way. So answering all of those questions are situational. And when you focus on situational learning, you lose generalizability. And when you lose generalizability, this is what you would find. You would find that it does not carry forward into other tasks. So therein it lies a bit of a problem, is there is such a thing as asking too many questions. So what I decided to do is say, well, let's look at the questions themselves. What kind of questions are being asked? Because we make ourselves available to solve problems. And the vast majority of these questions are of a particular type. And there are three types of questions. There are stupid questions, there are lazy questions, and there are good questions. Yes, there are stupid questions. I'm going to give you an example of a stupid question that I got. Do I have to watch the video and read the readings to pass the exam? Well, that's a stupid question. It doesn't even require an answer. That's a stupid question. I think we can all agree on that. When it comes to asking questions about learning, most professors and most educators will tell you, if you don't know something, ask. There are no stupid questions when you don't know something. But there are lazy questions. And lazy questions are asking something that can clearly be looked up. Now, the process of looking it up is a cognitive process you should go through because you then internalize that knowledge. But when I just hand it to you, well, you haven't gone through the process of earning that knowledge. It was given to you. It's not the same. So we find that the majority of the questions here are things that could just be looked up. And as such, we hypothesize that we can raise this pass rate by forcing you to look it up. That if it can be looked up, we should simply just say, look it up, or this is something that can be looked up. Now, I do that from time to time when somebody asks a question where I know it's clearly written down in the reading. I'll just give a section number. Here it is right here. You have to be resourceful now. Here it is right here. This is a much better answer to your question than me just telling you the answer. Because now you're going to start reading and some other things may start to fit into place. Why? Because now you're reading for an answer. So suddenly everything is much more relevant. So for this particular cohort here, one of the strategies that we would think makes a lot of sense is look it up. Whatever question you happen to have, you should try to work through it first, look it up, and then as a last resort, if you can't get it, then you ask a question. You know, there are things in the market that happen sometimes that make me wonder, and I don't have the answers for them. I'll look at an effect and I'll think, you know, what's going on there? I'll work as hard as I can to figure it out, but I do have a network of people that I can reach out to. If I reached out to them as my first option every time, what's going on here? What's going on there? What's going on here? I would slowly lose that network because after a while they would say, look, this guy's making me do all the heavy lifting. So when you ask questions of things that could just be looked up, you're not really asking someone to solve a problem for you. You're asking someone to complete a task for you. That's not learning. That's actually crippling you by having somebody complete all your tasks for you. Here's a good example of the effect that it can have. And I'm going to use a gym analogy because I've spent many years in the gym throughout my 20s and 30s, and I've seen what works and I've seen what doesn't work. And every gym I've ever been to, in every city I've ever lived, every gym I've ever been to, there's always one guy who feels he needs to lift way more than he can lift and get a spotter on absolutely every rep. What's the point? So, you're bench pressing and maybe this person is capable of 185, sets at 185, but wants to do 225, wants to be the big man there, wants to do 225, 40 pounds above his weight class. And his partner, of course, is doing a spot on every rep, lifting up 40 to 50 pounds from on every rep. He's not lifting 225. He's lifting 185. He just thinks he's lifting 225. If there was a competition in the gym for bench pressing 225, that person would fail. That person would lose that competition hands down because they never really lifted it on their own. They never really did the work on their own. They always had somebody doing the rest of the heavy lifting for them. And this is what we are hypothesizing is the problem over here. Why significantly lower pass rates? It doesn't make a lot of sense. So just something to think about, something to reflect on that, if you are inquisitive, I don't want to push back on that. But what I want to do is suggest a different process for you. That take a moment, think it through. Rewatch a little segment of the video or just open the reading. And you don't have to look very far in the reading. There's always a lookup, a little magnifying glass in the top corner you click on and you can type in a keyword and you can find it in the reading fairly quickly. Or you can look in the top of the corner, it's LOSH. You can sort of look at that first paragraph of the reading and it says section 3 or 4 will discuss this or discuss that section. Section 5 is LOSH. You go down to section 5 and you'll find it. It's far more rewarding because suddenly your conceptual map starts to come into place and starts to come into focus, and then you'll get to that point where everything clicks and suddenly all of that stuff makes sense. Now you own that. They weren't little pieces given to you where you say, okay, I think this will put everything together, because all you're doing is just putting tape around the broken pieces. So we'll, give you something to think about there. Let's look at some strategies that we know work. And I think there's 5 or 6 of them here. Okay, so this what I'm going to give you, I've got 5 of them actually, and these are sort of the best techniques out there for learning, regardless of who you are. The most effective way to do it is to learn or review in your own words. So rather than looking at somebody else's notes or taking a sentence from a reading and writing it down and trying to memorize that sentence, say it in your own words. Try to repeat, once that you've done that paragraph, just cover it up and repeat back to yourself what that paragraph said or what that concept is about in your own words. Explain it to an invisible other person that's sitting there. When you vocalize it, if you imagine somebody sitting across from you, when you vocalize it, you start to hear it in your mind rather than just thinking it through. Try to explain it to someone, or better, explain it to a study partner. Just say, listen, I'm going to try to explain this to you. Tell me if I got this, or tell me if you understand this. This is actually the best approach. Distributed learning. Your brain and everybody's brain has certain structures, and it has certain responses. And your brain is going to be the sharpest in the morning. So you're going to want to put, as early in the morning as you can, the tasks or the readings that you find most cognitively challenging. Typically, they're the quantitative readings. So you'll have a morning session and an afternoon session or an evening session. In the morning session, you're going to shove things like economics and quant and fixed income and derivatives into the morning. And in the evening, you're going to do more conceptual readings. And it's okay to follow 2 sections at a time. I'm going to do quant in the morning, and I'm going to do let's say equity analysis in the evening, because that's not really heavily quant driven. There are a lot of formulas in there, but it's not quant. It's a lot of adding and subtracting. I don't consider that quant driven. Or whatever topic you want in the PM that leans less towards the more quantitatively driven and more towards the conceptual topics. So that's called distributed learning. You're distributing your learning over different topics over the course of the day, and you're spreading out your studying instead of these marathon 3-hour sessions. It's 45 minutes to 60 minutes in the AM, 45 to 60 in the PM, only because over time, here's what happens to your learning, is it starts to decay very, very rapidly, and usually that's around 45 minutes, which means the next 45 minutes really is worth about 20 minutes if you started fresh. And then the next 45 minutes is worth even less. So having these small little segments multiple times throughout the day and different topics that you're doing, that tends to work very, very well. Using assessment as learning reinforcement and not learning replacement. All right, so the emphasis on finding more and more question banks, more and more mock exams, put that in the back seat. There is such a thing as too much, and there is such a thing as not ready. The question banks that you're using should be to complete your knowledge. They should be for learning reinforcement and not as an alternative to learning. Do your own heavy lifting. If it can be looked up, look it up. The process of looking it up, the cognitive process of looking it up is necessary to internalize it. Again, if it's just given to you, it's not the same thing. And our numbers are showing that it's not the same thing, that it actually, as a group, hurts you. So if it can be looked up, look it up. Think it through first. Now, on our site, under every reading video, we have the comment section below. There is a tab for private comments. It's okay to type in all your questions in your private comments. And then as you go through the video the second time, or you think it through, you can start deleting some of those questions that you had because they answered themselves through your own effort. Whatever's left over, send over to the other side. Send over to the forum side. There you go. Those are the ones that you're not going to figure out or you didn't get. Off you go. Let me show you for assessment as learning reinforcement. Let me show you something we're doing with our question bank because we think, well, with all of these things, how can we put something into place that will actually give you information, valuable information about how you're progressing? So let me show you something we're doing with our question bank now. It's going to take us about a year to put this in place, but you'll see fold out over the course of the year. So when you go through certain readings from here on in, you're going to see a couple of things. You're going to see a little flag here. When you see this M, this little flag here, that means that I wrote the question. If you don't see that little badge there, it means I didn't write it. But you're going to see this on the other side. There's analysis. Notice here we have understanding. Here's an application question, another analysis question, a remembering question, an understanding question. And it's based on it's based on Bloom's taxonomy of learning, where there are different levels of learning, and the lowest level of learning is just rote memorization, which is basically remembering. So when we scroll down to a question that is remembering, for example, this type of question here, the type of least economically driven by retail sales growth would be, you can memorize your way through questions like that. And then the next level up from that is understanding. So the next question here, you're not going to memorize your way through. You'd have to at least understand what you've memorized. So this gives you a score based on your ability to understand what's going on. We have application questions. This will give you a score based on your ability to apply what you understand. The next level up is analysis, and there's an analysis question here, which is not an easy question. It is a more challenging question. So that after a reading is done, you will get a score broken down by learning type. What is your score based on your ability to remember? What is your score based on your ability to understand? What is your score based on your ability to apply? So then you can start to see, look, as far as remembering goes and understanding goes, I got that, but I break down when it comes to applying and analyzing. Well, that's something. At least it tells you where you need to focus your attention. Reading and reading again and again and memorizing more and more is not going to help, because you got the remembering part and you got the understanding part. That's not going to help. What's going to help are more questions in the application sphere where you apply again and again, and that's math. Whenever you're applying something, math is something that needs to be done repetitively. So this is something that you're going to start to see roll out across a number of readings at all three levels, where we will be tagging the questions. It's not an easy thing to do, because sometimes a question lends itself well to being tagged. Sometimes it has to be completely rewritten to fit within a certain type of learning style. But this will at least help you. So if you're scoring 50% all the time, well, it's, where should you put your energy? Now, if you look at your score breakdown and you see, look, I'm scoring 80 to 90% on the remembering questions, well, then memorization is not a problem. You've got that part down, but you're only scoring, 40 or 50% on the understanding. There's where it breaks down. At least it will give you some feedback as to where you're breaking down, so that when you do use the question bank as a reinforcement for learning, it then will tell you at what level you have learnt to. Whether you've learned all the way up to the level of understanding, or whether you can extend that to application, and whether you can extend that to analyzing. Now, at level 1, there are very few analyzing questions. Most of them are remembering, understanding, and applying. Level 2 gets to analyzing, and level 3 gets even higher, all the way to evaluation, which is an even higher level learning question. So after a reading is done, you can look at your score based on the learning level of learning, and it'll give you sort of where you are in that mix. So we think that might be better feedback than just, hey, you got 70% on this quiz. It could be that the quiz was full of remembering questions, and that's really not helping you very much, because all it did was test your ability to memorize, right? And you think 70% is good, but 70% of the quiz was just your ability to remember stuff. So that's sort of rolling out. We anticipate that this will take about a year. Here's why. We have to do it in 3 or 4 readings at each level first, and then we need data. We need feedback. We need to see exactly how it works, because if we have to make adjustments, it's easier to make adjustments on 3 or 4 readings at each level than to make adjustments across the whole thing. Once that seems to be working fine, then we expand the number of readings that have this feature, and then we wait to see what the feedback is on that based on the data that we're getting. Is it useful? Is it working? Is there something we need to tweak in this? And then once we see that it's fairly solid and working, then we roll it out over all the readings, but it does take time. So if you're at level 1, you'll start to see this showing up. By the time you progress to level 2, 60 to 70% of that question bank will be set up. And by the time you get to level 3, 100% will be set up for you. But it is going to take time. This is not an easy thing to do, and it is a long, slow, tedious process to put into place. Just to give you some visibility on that, because I don't want to have to answer 50 questions a day about when is this going to be done. I'm telling you right now, it'll be done when it gets done, and you'll just see it happen slowly over the readings as you get to them. That's all. And finally, and this sort of feeds off the first bit of advice we had, which is to sort of repeat it to yourself in your own words, or to teach it to somebody else. Answer other candidates' questions. And this could substitute very well in place for even more quiz questions, because after you're scoring at a certain level, more doesn't seem to help. At least we've seen that with the mock exams. Answer unstructured questions, and an unstructured question is a candidate question. Why is something like this? You can answer other candidates' questions either on our site or Reddit. On our site, if you look in the left menu and click on the menu item that says Reddit, it'll open up a new window and take you right to the CFA subreddit. Where there are, I think, some 40 or 50,000 other candidates that are asking questions. And there's a whole bunch of answers under each of those questions. I guarantee you that almost any question you have has been asked and answered on Reddit numerous times. But throw yourself in there. See if you can answer somebody else's question. You will never learn more than when you teach somebody else. Even if you really think you know something, once you start teaching, and when you're answering somebody else's questions, that's what you're doing, you're teaching them, you will find that you start seeing things with more clarity, that you'll see connections you normally didn't see, and not only that, you may not answer it. You may think you know the answer and write the answer, and then somebody will come in behind you and say, you're not quite right because of this, and move one thing over for you, and suddenly you might say, oh, now that makes a lot of sense for this other stuff that didn't fit into what I thought was going on. So this community, this crowdsourcing of your knowledge, or of the development of your knowledge, works very well. I mean, if we want to talk about how effective crowdsourcing is, look at Wall Street Bets and what's going on in the world today. All from that community and what comes out of a community of practice. Same thing. Even when you're learning, when you visit a community of practice like this, and you start asking questions and answering other people's questions, you develop fantastically. Those things work very, very well. So what doesn't work is more and more and more of the same when you're flatlining. So if you're in question banks and you're scoring 60% all the time, and the more questions you do, you're just not budging from the 60%, you're spinning your wheels, you're going sideways, you're not progressing. You're just learning again and again and again that you're 60% or 55% or 62%. And mock exams, after a certain number of mock exams, it starts to taper off to the point where the next one and the next one is not improving your score. Why do it? Why not look at something else that will improve your score and spend your time on higher value-added activities? So I hope this helps. As we get more data, hopefully I can update this video every 6 months or so as we start to get more data and start to see new patterns in the data about, okay, these candidates were successful. What do their patterns look like? These were unsuccessful. Is there a significant difference between the two? And if there is, then we found something. Well, that's it.